3 months before the wedding, my fiancé brought another woman into our home. I thought I was hearing things. Standing in the foyer with my suitcase, I noticed a pair of Chanel sandals with camellias by the shoe rack. Size 8. Not my size. The estate manager, Harrison, walked over to take my luggage. His expression looked as if he had swallowed a fly. "Miss Sterling, you've returned." Miss Sterling. Not the lady of the house, not the future Mrs. Vance. They used to call me Cassidy, but now they even dropped my first name. I did not ask any questions, changed into my own slippers, and went upstairs. The wheels of my suitcase clattered loudly against the hardwood stairs, sounding as if I were dragging a corpse through an empty house. The door to the master bedroom was slightly ajar. From the crack, I could hear a woman's laugh, deliberately soft and sultry. "Donovan, do you like this nightgown? I specifically chose the champagne color. It matches your sheets so well." I did not walk in. Through the gap, I saw Aubrey Kensington. She was standing by the bed in a silk slip with thin straps, holding a peignoir against her body. Her open suitcase was sprawled across the luxury rug. Lingerie, cosmetics, and skincare products were scattered everywhere, as if she were marking her territory. I had slept in that bed for 2 years. Donovan had simply changed the bedding last month. He told me, "Let's change the color, change the mood." Now I understood that it wasn't about the mood. It was about the person. Donovan Vance, leaning against the headboard, was smoking. His robe was carelessly tied, exposing his chest. "If you like it, keep it," he said. His tone was as indifferent as if he were talking about the weather. "Then all these empty shelves in the walk-in closet. Can I take them?" Aubrey opened the sliding closet door and looked back at him with shining eyes. She paused, biting her lower lip, and her voice dropped lower. "There are still someone else's clothes in these cabinets." Donovan flicked his ashes and said nothing. Aubrey walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, placing her hand on his knee. "Donovan, I don't want Miss Sterling to think I'm taking her place. Maybe I should stay in the guest room?" After a 3-second pause, Donovan put out his cigarette in the ashtray on the nightstand. "You will live here," he said. "You don't need to feel marginalized." Aubrey threw herself into his arms, wrapping around him like ivy around a tree. "Donovan, you are the best." I did not make a single sound standing outside that door. My hand rested on the handle of my suitcase. My knuckles had turned white from the tension, my nails digging into my palms. The pain clearly reminded me that this body was still capable of feeling. Turning around, I saw my reflection in the large mirror at the end of the hallway. A tailored business suit, high heels, my hair neatly gathered in a low bun. Today, to secure a corporate training contract, I had spent 4 hours on a flight from Chicago. I had spent the entire afternoon in a conference room negotiating with partners. I ate a sandwich in the back of a black car for lunch. The contract was signed. Vance Holdings had secured the exclusive development rights for the Southport Commercial District. I had wanted to rush back and tell him the good news, but he had prepared different news for me. I walked down the stairs, planting my feet on each step with such steady confidence that I surprised even myself. Harrison was still standing in the foyer. "Miss Sterling, which room should I take your suitcase to?" He asked which room, not if he should help me take it upstairs. Even he knew the master bedroom was off limits to me now. "The guest room," I answered. Harrison took the suitcase, avoiding my eyes. The curtains in the guest room were drawn, and the air held a faint scent of dampness. I sat on the edge of the bed, turning my phone screen on and off again. The time on the screen changed from 9:10 p.m. to 9:32 p.m. Footsteps echoed from the ceiling above. Aubrey was probably unpacking, arranging her bright little jars and bottles on the vanity in the master bedroom. I dialed a number. It was picked up after the second ring. The person on the other end remained silent. "It's me," I said. Archer Hawthorne's voice was low and steady, like tea gone cold in the dead of night. "Is what you talked about still on the table?" Silence hung on the line for a moment. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at the Manhattan City Clerk's office." "All right." Hanging up, I stood and drew back the curtains. The night outside the window was thick, like undiluted ink. The lanterns in the garden were lit, illuminating the lawn and the tulips Donovan had specially ordered from Holland. I had chosen the varieties of those flowers. He had not even changed those. He had simply changed me first. My phone vibrated again. It was an Instagram post from Aubrey. She had taken a selfie in that exact champagne nightgown, leaning against the headboard in the master bedroom. The caption consisted of a single word: home. The location tag was the Vance estate in Greenwich. Maybe she forgot to hide the post from me, or maybe she didn't forget at all. Maybe she did it on purpose. I double-tapped to like it. 30 seconds later, the post disappeared. Apparently, she finally remembered her privacy settings, but I had already taken a screenshot. I saved it into a hidden folder that already contained invoices for the Cartier bracelet. Donovan had bought her, photographs, hotel booking confirmations, and a comparison of their travel itineraries secretly forwarded to me by Donovan's assistant. I never interrogated Donovan. Not because I was forgiving, but because I was waiting. Waiting for my heart to go completely cold, or waiting for the right way to leave by delivering a crushing blow. Now, I had both. The next morning at 6 a.m., my makeup was already perfectly done. I wore a deep crimson dress, not loud, but the exact shade of dried blood. At 7 a.m., I knocked on the door of the master bedroom. Aubrey opened it. She was wearing Donovan's dress shirt, which barely covered her thighs. A flash of triumph crossed her eyes when she saw me. "Miss Sterling, did something happen so early?" "I need Donovan." Donovan walked out of the bathroom, tying his silk tie. Seeing me in the doorway, he froze for a second. "Did something happen?" His tone was completely different from how he spoke to Aubrey. With her, he was effortlessly casual. With me, it was business official. I used to think that was what trust sounded like. Now I realized it was just indifference. "The company is sending me on a business trip to Chicago for about a week," I said in a flat voice, as if reading an executive summary. Donovan frowned. "For how long?" "I just told you. A week." "What project requires that much time?" I didn't answer his question. Instead, I smiled. "Does it concern you?" Donovan was taken aback. At that moment, Aubrey walked over and looped her arm through his. "Donovan, since Miss Sterling is going on a business trip, don't ask so many questions. Corporate work is exhausting." Saying this, she looked at me with an innocent smile. "Miss Sterling, have a safe trip. I'll take care of the house, and Donovan." "The house?" She said the house. I stared at her for 3 seconds, then smiled. "All right then, I'm counting on you." When I turned to leave, Donovan suddenly called out to me. "Cassidy!" I stopped without looking back. He remained silent for 2 seconds before finally speaking. "Take care on the road." "Understood." Walking down the stairs, I counted in my head. From the moment I walked in, he had spoken exactly 5 full sentences to me. Did something happen? For how long? What project requires that much time? Does it concern you? Take care on the road. 5 sentences. Not a single word to keep me there. Not a single word to say this was wrong. Not a single word to ask about my feelings. Perfect. Just perfect. Donovan Vance, since you've pushed things to this extreme, don't blame me for acting even more ruthlessly. I walked out of the Greenwich estate. The morning sun was blinding. My phone screen lit up. A text message from Archer Hawthorne. Just 3 words, "I am here." I turned around and looked at the mansion where I had lived for 2 years. The curtains in the master bedroom were pulled back. Aubrey stood in the window with a cup of coffee, raising it from afar as if saluting me. I raised my hand as well, saying goodbye not to her, but to all the disgusting people and events inside that house. Then I opened the car door and drove out of the gates without looking back. Once I was a fair distance away, I dialed a number. "Mr. Attorney, draft a prenuptial agreement for me." "Miss Sterling, but your wedding with Mr. Vance is still 3 months away." "It won't be necessary," I cut him off, my voice as light as if discussing good weather. "The agreement won't be signed with Donovan Vance." Silence fell on the other end of the line. "It will be signed by me and a different man." I did not actually leave for Chicago, at least not that morning. After Donovan left for the office, only Aubrey and I remained in the mansion. I was packing my things in the guest room when she knocked. In her hands was a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. "Miss Sterling, drink some juice. I just made it." She was wearing my slippers, the fluffy, milk-white ones with bunny ears that I bought last month. Donovan had laughed at me then, saying I was in my 20s but still wearing such childish things. Now, I watched Aubrey's feet trample those bunny ears. There was a small coffee stain on the white fur. "Thank you." I took the juice and set it on the nightstand without touching it. Aubrey paced around the room, running her fingers over the curtains, the vanity, the closet door, as if inspecting her newly acquired domain. "The lighting in this room isn't very good," she noted with an overly sympathetic tone. "Miss Sterling, are you comfortable here? Should I tell Donovan to prepare the sunroom on the 3rd floor for you?" No need. Right, of course, she chuckled. You're leaving on a business trip anyway. You're only sleeping here for one night. I stayed silent, opened my suitcase, and began folding my clothes. She did not seem to have any intention of leaving and sat on the edge of the bed. Miss Sterling, I've been meaning to thank you. My hands, folding a blouse, paused. Thank you for taking care of Donovan all these 2 years, she said in a tone so light and natural it sounded like she was stating an undeniable truth. You can hand those duties over to me now. You deserve a rest. I carefully folded a silk blouse and placed it in a garment bag. I did this very slowly, smoothing out every crease. How long have you known Donovan? Aubrey hadn't expected me to ask a question first. She hesitated before answering. Half a year. Half a year. Donovan had proposed to me 5 months ago. He had rented out an entire waterfront restaurant. When fireworks exploded in the sky, he got down on one knee, offered the ring, and said, Cassidy, marry me. The fireworks were beautiful. Now I realized they were probably not set off just for me. Did you know he had a fiancé? I asked. Aubrey lowered her head and examined her rhinestone-encrusted nails glittering under the lamp. I knew, she said, raising her eyes to look at me with an honesty so brazen it made me want to laugh. But Donovan said there hadn't been any feelings between you two for a long time. He said being with you was exhausting. You're too strong, always arguing about who is right and who is wrong, never acting spoiled or relying on him. As she spoke, a faint smile played on her lips. He also said a relationship with you felt like corporate business, like negotiations, while being with me felt like a real romance. I stopped packing, not because I was hurt, but because Donovan had never told me this. What he needed, what he didn't need, what he liked, what he disliked. He never communicated it. Whenever I asked, he would just say, you decide. I had thought it was absolute trust. It turned out to be absolute indifference. Are you finished? I looked directly at Aubrey. She flinched under my gaze. Her smile froze for a second before the innocent expression returned. Miss Sterling, please don't be angry. I didn't mean to upset you. I just think that since Donovan has already made his choice, it's time for you to let go. You can't force feelings. She stood up from the bed, smoothing out Donovan's shirt. By the way, Donovan said we are going to try on wedding dresses this weekend. You know the wedding is in 3 months. But I will be the only bride. Finally, I laughed. Not a cold sneer, but genuinely. I found it hilarious. Well then, congratulations. Aubrey tilted her head, confused by my reaction. Miss Sterling, are you really not angry? Why should I be angry? I placed the last item into my suitcase, zipped it up, stood up, and looked at her. You picked up the trash I threw away. I should be thanking you. Aubrey's face twisted. What did you say? I said. I gripped the handle of my suitcase. I don't need Donovan Vance anymore. If you like him, take him. You don't even have to report to me. Aubrey's eyes instantly turned red. Cassidy Sterling, how dare you speak about Donovan like that? You know how incredible he is. You know how many women want to marry him. If you couldn't keep a man yourself, don't be so bitter now. She cried beautifully. Large tears rolled down her cheeks, the tip of her nose turned pink, and her lips trembled slightly. I understood why Donovan bought into it. Done crying? I leaned against the closet, crossing my arms over my chest. Aubrey froze. If you're done crying, get out. I need to rest. She opened her mouth, clearly wanting to say something else, but the look in my eyes made her swallow her words. She walked out of the room. At the door, she turned around. The tears had not yet dried, but a smirk had already appeared on her lips. Cassidy, you can pretend to be calm all you want, she said. I know your heart is bleeding. The door clicked shut. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. The ring was still on my finger, the very one Donovan had slipped on when he proposed. A 3-carat emerald-cut diamond. He had told me he personally selected the stone in Antwerp and had the setting crafted by a master jeweler. I had worn it for 5 months. It had left a faint indent on my ring finger. I took it off and placed it on the nightstand. The diamond flashed coldly in the lamplight, like a frozen tear. My phone rang. A message from Archer. Bags packed? I replied with one word. Yes. Should I send a car for you? No need. I'll drive myself. All right, tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't be late. I won't. Conversation over. My communication with Archer had always been this brief and to the point. Not a single wasted word. He was my former classmate from business school and the CEO of Hawthorne Capital. His net worth exceeded Donovan's by dozens of times, and more importantly, he owed me. He owed me a great deal. At 8 p.m., Donovan returned. I was having dinner in the formal dining room. Harrison had set a separate place for me. The dishes were simple, everything I liked. Harrison had worked in this house for 10 years and was probably the only person who still remembered my preferences. Donovan and Aubrey were having dinner in the living room. Behind the sliding doors, I couldn't hear what they were talking about. Only occasional laughter drifted through. Midway through my dinner, the door opened. Donovan walked in holding a bottle of red wine. "Cassidy, we opened this bottle to see you off." After handing our master bedroom over to another woman, he decided to see me off. I put down my fork and looked up at him. "All right." Donovan poured 2 glasses. He handed one to me and took the other for himself. He tapped his glass against mine. A light clink rang out. "Take care on the road." The exact same words as this morning. I took a sip. The wine was dry and astringent. "Donovan, is there anything you want to say to me?" He held his glass. His gaze lingered on my face for a few seconds before sliding away. "No." I nodded. "Good. Neither do I." He turned and walked away. As the door closed, I saw Aubrey standing right behind it, wrapping her arms around him and pressing her entire body against his. I finished the wine in one gulp, stood up, and carried my empty plate to the kitchen. Harrison was washing dishes. Seeing me, he hurriedly tried to take the plate from my hands. "Miss Sterling, leave it. I'll handle it." "Harrison." I placed the plate in the sink and leaned against the marble counter. "Thank you for looking out for me these past 2 years." Harrison's hands froze under the running water. "I'm leaving tomorrow, and I won't be coming back. Take care of yourself." Harrison lowered his head. His shoulders trembled slightly. "Miss Sterling, they treated you so unfairly." I smiled and patted his shoulder. "Unfairly?" When I walked out of the kitchen, the living room was empty. Footsteps and a woman's laughter drifted down from the staircase, fading higher and higher. I returned to the guest room. Closing the door, I leaned my back against it and shut my eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds. Then I opened them and began gathering my final belongings. The ring still lay on the nightstand. The light reflecting off the diamond fell onto the wooden surface like a tear ready to drop. I did not take it with me. At 2 a.m., the entire mansion plunged into total silence. Only the nightlights in the hallway emitted a dim yellow glow, turning it into a tunnel leading to the exit. I walked out of the guest room with my suitcase. I tried to roll it across the hardwood floor as quietly as possible. Step, 2, 3. Every step echoed the rhythm of my heartbeat. Passing by the master bedroom, I paused for a split second. A faint light bled from under the door. Apparently, Aubrey was not used to sleeping in total darkness. I could hear the steady breathing of 2 people. I averted my eyes and continued my path. As I walked down the stairs, my phone lit up. A message from Archer. A photograph of a key resting on a dark marble countertop. The keychain had a silver plate engraved with the letter H. A second message immediately followed. "The apartment is ready. In Tribeca, 3,000 square feet. Passcode is your birth date." I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know how to respond. He evidently guessed my hesitation. A third message arrived. "This is not charity. When you helped me, you didn't ask if I needed it either." I replied with a single word. "Okay." In the foyer, right next to the Chanel sandals with camellias, I saw a pair of men's dress shoes. Donovan's shoes. The toes were pointing toward the exit. Faint creases lined the Italian leather. He had worn them today. I opened the bottom drawer of the shoe cabinet and took out my car keys. The white Porsche Panamera in the garage was bought with my own money. The cost of the car, the insurance, the maintenance, everything was paid by me. Donovan had wanted to buy me a car, but I refused. I told him it felt safer relying on something I bought myself. Now, thinking back on it, I realized we were never on the same wavelength from the very beginning. He needed a woman who knew how to act spoiled and rely on him. And from the very beginning, I was accustomed to relying only on myself. The garage doors slowly rolled up. The headlights illuminated a black Maybach parked ahead. It was Donovan's car. The license plate ended in 777. I reversed the Porsche out of the garage. Driving past the Maybach, I rolled down the window and glanced at the license plate. Then I hit the gas and drove out of the estate gates. In the rearview mirror, the house where I had lived for 2 years grew smaller and more distant until it turned into a blurred point of light, dissolving into the night. My phone was connected to the car's Bluetooth, Archer called. "You're out?" "Yes." "Crying?" I froze for a moment, then let out a dry laugh. "No, I'm good." His voice was low, with a slight gravelly edge, as if he had just woken up. He's not worth it. Those 4 words warmed me more than all the declarations of love Donovan had given me over 2 years. Archer, after we get the certificate tomorrow, can I move into that apartment you mentioned? Silence hung on the other end for a second, and then he laughed. The keys are already yours. At 3:40 a.m., I parked outside a high-rise building in downtown. It was my own apartment. Donovan did not know it existed. I bought it 2 years ago, paying the down payment from my savings. The monthly mortgage was deducted straight from my payroll account. I didn't do it as a backup plan. I simply believed a woman should always have her own retreat. Now, this retreat had become my only sanctuary. The elevator took me to the 22nd floor. The door unlocked with my fingerprint. A 1-bedroom apartment, about 600 square feet. Light gray curtains, a dark green velvet sofa I picked out myself. All the furniture was covered in dust sheets, like presents waiting for their time. I pulled the sheet off the sofa and sat down. I opened the photo album on my phone. The first picture was taken the day Donovan proposed to me. Fireworks in the sky, him on one knee with a ring in his hand. I stood across from him, hands covering my mouth, eyes full of tears. The picture was taken by a waiter. Good angle, good lighting, like a movie poster. The second picture was the day we moved into the Greenwich estate. He stood by the door, reaching out his hand to me, saying, "Welcome home." The third was on his birthday. I cooked a whole table of food. I took a picture of him blowing out the candles. The warm yellow light from the flames beautifully illuminated his face. I scrolled through the photos one by one. Reaching the last one, my fingers hovered over the screen for a long time. The last photo was dated today. It showed the crack in the door to the master bedroom. Aubrey, in her champagne nightgown, sitting on the edge of the bed. Donovan leaning against the headboard, smoking. I hadn't taken a picture of that scene, but my eyes had memorized it perfectly. I selected all the photos in the album and hit delete. A dialog box popped up. Delete 321 photos? Confirm. The screen flashed. The album was empty. Next, I opened my contacts and found Donovan Vance's name. His profile picture was a side profile I had taken of him on a weekend, sunlight streaming through the window. He was sitting on the couch reading documents. A handsome profile. I opened the contact and hit delete. The system threw up another dialog box. Delete contact Donovan Vance? Confirm. Deleted from iMessage. Unfollowed on all social media. Removed as a payee in my banking app. Deleted his shipping address from my Amazon account. Cleared his order history from Uber Eats. In 40 minutes, I scrubbed Donovan Vance from every corner of that phone, like an eraser wiping away a misspelled word. At 5 a.m., I leaned back against the sofa and closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, the sky outside was already growing light. I washed my face, reapplied my makeup, and changed clothes. Not into yesterday's deep crimson dress, but a crisp white silk blouse and tailored black trousers. A professional look, as if I were going to sign a major contract. Before leaving, I checked my full-length reflection in the mirror. 26 years old, skin in great condition, no redness in my eyes, lips capable of forming a perfect smile. Excellent. The city clerk's office opened at 9 a.m. I arrived 20 minutes early. Several couples were standing by the entrance. Some held hands, some chatted quietly. The women carried flowers, the men wore suits. Everyone wore the exact same expression. A mix of anticipation for the future and nervous excitement. I stood at the end of the line, empty-handed, alone. My phone rang. Donovan. I answered without saying a word. "Cassidy, where are you?" His voice was groggy with sleep. "Harrison said you left for a business trip in the middle of the night," I replied flatly. "You have to leave at night to catch the early flight." Silence fell on the other end. Then I heard Aubrey's voice in the background, calling out softly, "Donovan, who is it?" "Nothing. Go back to sleep." Donovan's voice muffled slightly. He had clearly covered the receiver with his hand. Then he spoke to me again. "Cassidy, did you go into the master bedroom yesterday?" "No." "Then who put the ring on the nightstand?" I leaned against a stone pillar outside the building and looked up at the sky. The weather was perfect today, not a single cloud. Ideal for a wedding. "I put it there." Donovan's voice pitched higher. "You took the ring off?" "Yes." "Cassidy Sterling, what is the meaning of this?" "Nothing," I said. The ring was too tight. It was uncomfortable. I paid $350,000 for it. "I know, I cut him off. That's why I left it for your next fiancé. Don't mention it." The sound of something shattering against the floor echoed through the phone. "Cassidy Sterling, come back immediately." I can't. I'm boarding. You dare. I hung up. And I powered down my phone. At exactly 9 a.m., a black Rolls-Royce pulled up to City Hall. The door opened, and Archer stepped out. He wore a dark gray suit with no tie. The top 2 buttons of his dress shirt were undone, revealing his collarbones. His hair wasn't styled as sleekly as usual. A few strands fell across his forehead, softening his overall look. He walked up to me, looking down slightly. Been waiting long? 20 minutes. Traffic, he said. The word sounded a bit unnatural, like a man entirely unused to making excuses, struggling to force out an explanation. I couldn't help but smile. Archer, you look so cute when you're stuck in traffic. He gave me a look, saying nothing, but the tips of his ears turned red. Let's go. He nodded toward the doors. Wait. I pulled 2 documents from my bag. Sign this before we go in. Archer took them, flipped through a few pages, and raised an eyebrow in surprise. A prenuptial agreement. Yes, separate assets, separate debts. Any property acquired during the marriage belongs to each individually. In the event of a divorce, there will be no divorce. He lifted his eyes to meet mine. He handed the contract back. I'm not signing this. Why? Because it is unnecessary. He stared directly into my eyes. His voice was low, but every word drove home like a nail into stone. I, Archer Hawthorne, am marrying without the intention of ever getting divorced. The sunlight hit him from the side, casting a shadow across his face, splitting it perfectly between light and dark. It suddenly struck me that the weather today really was excellent. The agreement still needs to be signed, I said. It's not a matter of trust. It's procedure. Archer looked at me for 3 solid seconds. Then he pulled a fountain pen from the inner pocket of his suit jacket, flipped to the last page of the agreement, and signed his name. His handwriting was firm, the strokes aggressive. He handed the document back to me. Your turn. I signed it. Cassidy Sterling. He then folded the agreement and slipped it into his own pocket. I'll keep this. On the day of our golden anniversary, I'll burn it. I couldn't hold back a laugh. Golden anniversary? You'll be over 70 by then. What? He tilted his head. Do you think I'm old? No. I stopped laughing and looked at him seriously. I'm just afraid that by then you will regret this. Archer didn't answer. He pushed open the heavy glass door of the building and held it, letting me step in first. In the exact moment the door swung shut behind me, I heard him say something very quietly, so quietly his words almost drowned in the noise of the lobby. I won't be the one regretting it. The marriage registration took 10 minutes. There was a long line in the main hall. Archer didn't stand in it. He led me to a side door marked VIP Registry. A uniformed official was standing by the door. Seeing Archer, he immediately stood taller. Mr. Hawthorne, please come right in. Everything is prepared for you. I glanced at Archer. You arranged this in advance? Yes. When? Yesterday, after you called. The room was small but elegantly furnished. A floral arrangement sat on a table draped with a white lace cloth. Sunlight poured through the large window, painting the room a warm gold. A middle-aged woman wearing glasses sat behind the desk. 2 blank marriage certificates rested in front of her. Mr. Hawthorne, Miss Sterling, please have a seat. We sat down. She pulled a red velvet tray from her drawer, displaying 2 simple platinum wedding bands. Mr. Hawthorne brought these by yesterday. You can try them on. I picked one up. On the inner band, 2 letters were engraved. An H on one side, an S on the other. No grandiose vows of love, just 2 initials placed together, like 2 puzzle pieces. Does it fit? Archer asked. I slid the ring onto my ring finger. Perfectly. How did you know my size? He didn't answer. He simply put on his own ring, then held out his hand, palm up. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed, wrapping around my palm. Dry and warm. The grip wasn't tight, but it was solid. The official smiled. You can fill out the forms now. The form was straightforward. Name, gender, date of birth, social security number, marital status. When I reached the marital status box, my pen hovered for a moment. Single. 26 years old. First marriage. 3 months ago, I was planning a completely different wedding, and now I was sitting here filling out paperwork to marry another man. Life truly was unpredictable. After we filled out the forms, the official took the 2 certificates, processed them, and stamped them with the official seal. The sound of the stamp was crisp. Click. Congratulations. You are now legally married. Archer picked up both certificates, glanced at them, and handed one to me. Here. I took it and opened it. We weren't smiling broadly, just slightly turning up the corners of our mouths. But for some reason, this felt far more harmonious than any picture Donovan and I ever took. Walking out of the VIP room, I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 9:10 a.m. From the moment we walked in to the moment we walked out, exactly 10 minutes had passed. The couples in the main hall were still waiting in line. Some were dozing on the benches, some scrolling on their phones, some soothing crying babies. No one noticed us stepping out of the VIP suite. No one knew that this woman in the white silk blouse had just sealed her marriage in 10 minutes. Standing on the steps outside, I took a deep breath. The air smelled like flowers. I had no idea where the scent was coming from. Hungry? Archer stood beside me, his hands shoved in his pockets. His voice was as casual as if he were checking the weather. A little. What do you want? Ricotta pancakes with blueberry compote. He looked at me, the corners of his lips twitching. Apparently, the answer surprised him. I thought you'd say brunch somewhere fancy, or French bistro food. Today I want pancakes, I said. He nodded, opened the car door for me, and then got behind the wheel himself. Starting the engine, he turned down a narrow street and, 5 minutes later, pulled up outside an unassuming local coffee shop. The place was small, with a few wrought iron tables set up on the sidewalk. The air smelled of freshly roasted espresso and baked goods. Archer took off his suit jacket, draped it over the back of a chair, rolled up his dress shirt sleeves, and called out to the barista, 2 orders of the ricotta pancakes, 2 cappuccinos, and a cinnamon roll. The barista, seeing him, froze for a second. "Oh, Mr. Hawthorne, what brings you around?" "Brought someone for breakfast," he said, pulling out a chair for me. The barista's eyes slid over my face, and then he broke into a massive grin. Of course. Take a seat. Coming right up." The pancakes arrived steaming hot, fresh off the griddle, dripping with compote. The coffee was aromatic. I cut a piece of pancake and took a bite. "Archer, you said you owed me a lot. We're even now." He stopped eating for a moment. "No. Then what is this?" He placed his cinnamon roll onto my plate. "That debt I'll be paying you back for the rest of my life. This," he paused, "this I wanted to do myself." I didn't ask anything else. I lowered my head and took a sip of my coffee. It was delicious. After breakfast, Archer drove me to the luxury building in Tribeca. The passcode is the year and date of your birth. 6 digits. He handed me a key fob. "Everything inside is cleaned and ready. If you need anything, tell the concierge." "And you? Aren't you going to live here?" He glanced at me. "Do you want me to live here?" I didn't know what to say. Archer pressed the fob into my hand. His fingers brushed lightly against my palm. "Take your time. Live alone for a while. When you decide, let me know." He got back into the car. The Rolls-Royce engine purred quietly as he pulled out of the driveway. I stood there, gripping the fob. The silver plate on the ring caught the sunlight. It was engraved with the letter H. The elevator took me to the 28th floor. I entered the passcode. The lock clicked softly. The foyer lights flared to life automatically. Warm yellow light flooded the hallway. I took off my shoes and walked inside, stepping barefoot on the hardwood floor. In the living room, floor-to-ceiling windows spanned the entire wall. The curtains were light gray linen. A breeze blew in from a cracked window, making the fabric ripple slightly. The sofa was dark blue velvet. On the coffee table sat a potted orchid with pale violet petals, glistening with tiny drops of water. On the dining table lay a white envelope. I opened it. Inside was a sleek black credit card and a note. The note contained a single line written in Archer's handwriting. "PIN is the same as the door code. Buy whatever you want, don't budget." I folded the note and slid it back into the envelope alongside the card. Then I walked into the master bedroom. The bed was massive, fitted with pristine white sheets. A folded silk pajama set rested on the pillows. I picked it up and checked the tag. My size. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph. It was a picture of Archer and me. The photo was taken 3 years ago at a business school alumni mixer. I was standing by a window with a champagne flute. He had walked up behind me accidentally or intentionally, and we were caught in the same frame. In the picture, I wasn't looking at the camera, and neither was he. We were looking in different directions, but standing so close that the hem of my dress was brushing against his tailored trousers. When did he even save this photo? I placed the frame back and walked over to the window, pulling the curtains wide. From the 28th floor, half the Manhattan skyline sprawled out before me. Sunlight hit the wedding band on my ring finger. Engraved on the inside was the letter S. I twisted the ring, running my thumb over the engraving. Right then, a phone rang. Not my new one, my old work phone, buried in my handbag. I had kept only one contact saved on it, Donovan's executive assistant. I answered. Miss Sterling, Donovan is looking for you like a madman. He told me to check your flights, but there's no record of a ticket purchased under your name at any airline. He also had me check hotel reservations. Nothing, Miss Sterling. The assistant's voice dropped to a whisper. Donovan is in the office, destroying everything, he said. He said if you don't come back, he's going to what? I leaned against the glass, looking out over the city. He'll throw out all the belongings you left at the estate. I scoffed. Tell him to throw them out. But your things. What I took is mine, I said. What I left behind, I no longer need. Hanging up, I powered down that phone as well. Then I lay back on the massive bed and closed my eyes. The linens smelled like cedar. Maybe it was the scent of fabric softener. Or maybe it was the scent of Archer. I buried my face in the pillow and took a deep breath. My heart beat slowly and steadily. Not like back at the Vance estate, where every noise from the master bedroom made it race chaotically, like a bird trapped in a cage. Now, everything was different. The cage was open. The bird had flown away. Donovan realized something was wrong on the third day. Everything that happened during those 3 days, I later learned from Harrison. He spoke to me over the phone, lowering his voice, which trembled as though he were describing a disaster he had witnessed firsthand. On the first day, Donovan didn't look for me. He went to work as usual, ran his meetings, and on his lunch break, Aubrey brought him a homemade lunch. Aubrey took a dozen selfies in the elevator of the Vance Holdings high-rise and posted them on Instagram with captions ranging from, "Bringing lunch to my love" to, "A day in the life of a good wife." That evening, he took Aubrey to a Michelin-starred French restaurant, the exact one he had promised to take me to. I had tried 3 times to get a reservation there, to no avail. For him, it took exactly 1 phone call. Aubrey took photos of the wine, the steak, the dessert, Donovan's hands cutting the meat, and the city view from the window. Compiling 9 photos into a carousel, she posted them with the caption, "With the right person, every day is a celebration." Harrison said Donovan drank heavily that night. Aubrey practically had to carry him into the house. Walking past the guest room, he stopped. "Did Cassidy call today?" "No," Aubrey answered. Donovan stared at the closed door of the guest room for a few seconds before Aubrey led him upstairs. On the second day, Donovan started looking for me. He called my cell powered off, sent an iMessage not delivered. He ordered his assistant to track my movements. The assistant tore through airline and hotel databases, but found absolutely 0 records tied to me. He started to panic. Harrison said he paced the living room for a long time, gripping his phone and dialing my number over and over. Every time, the mechanical voice repeated, "The subscriber you have dialed is unavailable." Aubrey came down the stairs in a silk chemise, holding a glass of milk. "Donovan, stop calling. She's not a child, she won't get lost. Maybe she just wants to be alone." Donovan spun around and glared at her. "Shut up." The glass in Aubrey's hand shook. "Donovan." I said, "Shut up." It was the first time Donovan had ever yelled at Aubrey. Harrison said Aubrey's face looked as though she had been slapped. But she quickly recovered, set down the glass, walked over to Donovan, and placed her hand on his shoulder. Her voice was as soft as melting butter. "I'm sorry. I'm just worried about Miss Sterling. She's all alone in an unfamiliar city. What if something happens?" Donovan didn't push her away, but he didn't look at her either. He stared at the undelivered icon on his phone screen, typing and deleting messages, before finally hurling his phone onto the couch. "Find her friends' numbers. Call all of them." The assistant called everyone. My friends' answers were all roughly the same. "Cassidy? Isn't she with you?" "I don't know, she hasn't called me lately. Probably on a business trip. She'll be back in a few days." No one knew where I was because I hadn't told anyone. On the 3rd day, Donovan lost his mind. He forced his assistant to pull the estate's security footage. The video showed me walking out of the guest room with my suitcase at 2:00 a.m., stopping for a second by the master bedroom, and then, without looking back, walking down the stairs. The foyer light flickering on for a moment before turning off. The garage doors slowly rising, the white Porsche pulling out into the driveway. the taillights leaving 2 red streaks in the night, growing further away until they finally disappeared. Donovan watched that footage over and over. Harrison said he sat in his study in front of the monitor, endlessly rewinding the clip, as if searching for some hidden clue. He saw me pause for a second outside his bedroom. He saw my perfectly straight spine as I walked down the stairs. He saw me open the drawer and grab the car keys. He saw that in the exact moment the Porsche reversed out of the gates, my profile flashed briefly in the rearview mirror. No tears, no hesitation, no looking back. Then he ordered the guest room torn apart. The closet was empty. The vanity was empty. There was nothing on the nightstand except a glass with some leftover water. That 3-carat ring lay on the nightstand in the master bedroom. The diamond glittered under the lamp. Underneath the ring was a printed note. It read exactly 4 words. I don't need you. Printed, not handwritten. I specifically used a printer because handwriting betrays emotion, whereas printed font is as cold as the terms of a contract. Donovan crumpled the note, smoothed it out, and crumpled it again. The paper turned into a mangled ball in his fist. By the time he smoothed it out again, the ink had blurred from the sweat of his palm. Find her. He slammed the note onto his desk. His voice was hoarse, like sandpaper grinding against metal. Turn the entire city upside down, but find her. His assistant asked, Mr. Vance, should we file a police report? Donovan remained silent for a long time. File what? His voice suddenly dropped to a whisper. She's not missing. She left. He finally said it out loud. She left. Not kidnapped, not in an accident, not a missing person. She had simply packed her bags, taken off the ring, and at 2 a.m, driven out of his life cleanly, permanently. Meanwhile, I was sitting in Archer's 3,000-square-foot apartment on the dark blue velvet sofa. A cup of hot tea steamed by my feet, and I held a thick dossier in my hands. The document had been dropped off by Archer's assistant. The cover read, Analytical Report, Vance Holdings Southport Commercial District Development Project. I flipped to the first page. Dense rows of data and charts. All of them pointed to one conclusion. Vance Holdings' investment in this plot of land carried catastrophic risks. This was the very plot of land I had secured during my business trip. Donovan thought that by winning the exclusive development rights, he had scored a massive victory. He didn't know that a newly planned subway line ran directly beneath that plot. According to the city's zoning plan, the subway station exit would occupy exactly 1/3 of the project's footprint. The moment that urban plan was made public, Vance Holdings' entire development blueprint would have to be scrapped, and the billions of dollars sunk in the initial phases would be completely wiped out. I had discovered this issue during the negotiations. I never told Donovan, because that evening, standing outside the master bedroom with my suitcase, I had heard him say to Aubrey, "You don't need to feel marginalized." The doorbell rang. I set the dossier down and went to open the door. Archer stood on the threshold holding 2 takeout bags. Dinner. He shook the bags. The spicy aroma of garlic, peppers, and Cajun seasoning drifted out. Signature dish from the Louisiana place downstairs. Don't know if you handle spice well. I handle it fine. He walked into the living room. Catching sight of the documents on the coffee table, he paused for a second. Read through it already? Yes. I took the bags from him and walked to the kitchen. Plating the food, I continued. When Donovan bought this plot, he didn't run a geological survey or study the city's urban planning committee updates. He only looked at the location and the price. He thought he was getting a steal. Archer leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest. And you didn't remind him? Why should I have? I set the bowls of jambalaya on the counter. He's so smart. He should have figured it out himself. Archer smiled. It was the first time I had heard him laugh out loud. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine laugh. His eyes narrowed, and the tip of a canine tooth showed. Cassidy Sterling, you are far more ruthless than I thought. Thanks for the compliment. We sat down to eat. The food was so spicy it brought tears to my eyes, but I couldn't stop eating. Midway through dinner, Archer's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and turned it toward me. Donovan Vance. Answer it? He asked. I picked up a piece of sausage with my fork. Answer it. Archer hit accept and put it on speakerphone. Donovan's voice bled through the speaker, ragged and rough, as if it had been dragged across gravel. Archer, I have a matter to discuss with you. Speak. You know Cassidy Sterling. You went to business school together. Has she contacted you? Archer glanced at me. I nodded. She has. Dead silence fell over the line, followed by the sound of Donovan's rapid breathing. "Where is she? Do you really think I'd tell you?" "Archer," Donovan's voice spiked. "She is my fiancé." Archer's voice remained absolutely calm. "Then why did your fiancé move out of your house in the middle of the night?" Silence again. A long one. I almost thought Donovan had hung up. Then his voice returned, much quieter this time, as if crushed under an immense weight. "What did she tell you?" "She said she doesn't need you anymore." With that, Archer hung up, then placed his phone face down on the table. "Eat." I looked at the food on my plate. "Archer." "Do you think he'll find me here?" "He won't." Archer scooped another piece of meat onto my plate. "And even if he does, he wouldn't dare walk through that door." "Why?" He lifted his eyes to look at me. The warm yellow light over the dining table reflected in his pupils. "Because this isn't his territory." A week passed. I had lived in Archer's apartment for 7 days. During those 7 days, I stayed off all social media, changed my SIM card, slept until noon, sunbathed by the floor-to-ceiling windows, read books, and drank tea. Archer came over every evening for dinner. Sometimes he brought takeout, sometimes he cooked himself. He was surprisingly good at it, especially his honey-glazed spare ribs. On the 7th evening, he brought an invitation, pressed in silver foil on thick, dark gray cardstock. The Hawthorne Foundation Charity Gala. Organizer, a foundation owned by Archer's Corporation. Venue, the Grand Ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton. Time, the day after tomorrow, evening. "Wanna go?" He tossed the invitation onto the coffee table. I picked it up and opened the guest list. The page was filled with familiar names. Donovan Vance's name was there too. Next to it was a subnote, co-organizer, accompanied by Aubrey Kensington. "Did you arrange this?" Archer sat on the sofa, casually crossing one leg over the other, acting as if we were discussing something trivial. "The charity gala happens every year. We just happened to add Vance Holdings to the co-sponsor list this time around." "Why?" "Because I wanted to see." He looked directly into my eyes. "Do you want him to see?" "To see me as the wife of Archer Hawthorne." "I do," I said. He smiled, then pulled a dark blue velvet box from his suit pocket and placed it next to the invitation. "Then wear this." I opened the box. Inside was a necklace. A pear-shaped sapphire pendant surrounded by a halo of crushed diamonds. Under the lamplight, it radiated a deep azure glow, as if a fragment of the night sky had been trapped inside. Beneath the necklace lay matching stud earrings, also sapphires and diamonds. "This is too expensive. The jewelry worn by Archer Hawthorne's wife cannot be cheap." He stood up, picked up the necklace, stepped behind me, and carefully fastened the clasp at the nape of my neck. His fingers brushed against my skin cool, but the point of contact instantly flared hot. "I'll pick you up at 7 the day after tomorrow." The night of the charity gala, I wore a floor-length black velvet gown. The neckline perfectly showcased the sapphire pendant. I had my hair swept up into an elegant updo, exposing the earrings. The woman in the mirror didn't look like me, not because of the makeup or the dress, but because of the look in her eyes. In the past, standing next to Donovan, my gaze always held a sort of cautious appeasement. Before every corporate event, I would double-check my appearance multiple times, terrified of embarrassing him in front of his partners. In photos, I always made sure to lean into him, take his arm, and flash a perfectly calculated smile. Back then, I was Donovan Vance's fiancé. Today, I was Archer Hawthorne's wife. I wasn't an accessory or a decoration. I was the person standing next to him. At exactly 7 o'clock, Archer appeared at the door. He wore a sharp, black three-piece suit. His tie was a midnight blue, perfectly matching my sapphires. His hair was slicked back flawlessly, exposing a strong jawline. He looked like he had just stepped off a magazine cover. Seeing me, his gaze lingered for a moment. "Well?" I did a slight twirl. "Stunning," he said, holding out his hand. I placed my hand in his, and together we stepped into the elevator. Our silhouettes reflected in the polished doors. He was half a head taller than me. I held his arm. The hem of my dress brushed against his trousers, just like in that photograph from 3 years ago. The ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton was a blaze of lights. A red carpet out front, flanked by reporters and the blinding flash of cameras. The event director greeting guests immediately rushed over upon seeing Archer. "Mr. Hawthorne, please, right this way. Your seat is at the head table." The director's eyes slid over to me, and he froze for a second. "And your companion?" "This is my wife." Archer's voice wasn't loud, but several nearby reporters whipped their heads around. I felt dozens of camera lenses lock onto us simultaneously. Wife? The director nearly lost his composure. Mr. Hawthorne, you got married? Yes, a few days ago. Archer wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me closer. If you wouldn't mind, please add my wife's name to my place card. When we walked into the ballroom, it was already packed with guests. The head table sat dead center, covered in floral arrangements and name cards. Archer's seat was right in the middle. Next to his printed card sat another one, freshly written by hand in calligraphy. The ink wasn't even dry yet. Mrs. Hawthorne. All eyes in the room gravitated toward me. I could hear the hushed whispers rippling through the crowd. Who is that? When did Hawthorne get married? I've never even seen her. What family is she from? Wait, isn't that the girl who was with Vance? Cassidy, right? I sat down next to Archer with absolute composure. He pulled my chair out for me, waiting until I was fully seated before taking his own place. The movement was entirely natural, making it obvious to everyone watching that this wasn't just performative chivalry, it was a habit. A stir rippled near the entrance to the ballroom. Donovan Vance had arrived. He was wearing a dark gray suit. His face looked gaunt, and dark circles shadowed his eyes, visible even from a distance. Aubrey clung to his arm. She wore a champagne-colored mermaid gown and a string of pearls. She practically glowed, posing eagerly for the cameras. Then her gaze swept past the head table, skipping Archer and landing directly on me. Her smile froze. Donovan saw me too. He stopped dead in his tracks. Even across the massive ballroom, I watched his expression violently shift from shock to confusion, from confusion to pure fury, and then to a kind of bewildered panic I had never seen on him before. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Aubrey tugged at his arm. Donovan, our seats are over there. Donovan didn't budge. He ripped his arm out of Aubrey's grasp and began marching straight toward the head table. He walked so fast his dress shoes echoed sharply against the marble floors. Reaching me, he stopped. Cassidy. I raised my eyes to meet his. Long time no see, Mr. Vance. Not Donovan, not Vance. Mr. Vance. His Adam's apple bobbed. Where have you been all these days? Why wouldn't you answer my calls? Why? His eyes dragged down to the sapphire necklace resting on my collarbone, to Archer's hand resting casually on the back of my chair, and finally to the handwritten card sitting on the table. Mrs. Hawthorne. 3 words, like 3 knives plunged straight into his eyes. You got married. His voice was barely audible. Yes. To who? Archer stood up. He was half a head taller than Donovan, looking down at him with zero expression. To me? Donovan clenched his fist so hard his knuckles turned stark white. Cassidy, we were engaged for 5 months. You leave without saying a single word, and immediately marry another man. His voice was low, but every syllable was squeezed through gritted teeth. Were you playing me? Playing you? I stood up and looked him dead in the eye. Donovan, you brought another woman into our home, moved her into our bedroom, let her wear my slippers, let her use my vanity. And after all that, you have the nerve to say I played you? Donovan's face drained of color. Aubrey just stayed for a couple of days. And therefore the wedding date needed to be transferred to her name? He froze. How do you know that? Aubrey posted it on Instagram, I said. Location tag, the bridal boutique. Caption, wedding prep. You were standing right behind her. Your reflection was in the mirror. Donovan's lips moved, but he couldn't formulate a single word. Right then, Aubrey rushed over. She hooked her arm through Donovan's, swept a judging look over Archer and me, and smiled. Miss Sterling, congratulations. I didn't expect you to find a replacement so quickly. She deliberately placed heavy emphasis on the word replacement. I didn't even look at her. I looked at Archer. Husband. The word felt strange in my own mouth. I paused for a split second. Archer looked at me, something flashing in his eyes. Yes? This lady says you are a replacement. I slid my hand into his. What do you think? Archer took my hand. His thumb brushed over the wedding band on my finger. Then he lifted his chin, looked past Aubrey directly at Donovan, and spoke. Mr. Vance. His voice wasn't loud, but the entire ballroom seemed to go dead silent. What you threw away is exactly what I spent 3 years trying to win. So tell me, who is the replacement here? Donovan's face lost whatever color it had left. He stared at me. A violent storm of incomprehensible emotions raged in his eyes. Cassidy. Mr. Vance, I cut him off. Tonight is a charity gala, not a reunion for old friends. Your seat is over there. I jutted my chin toward the corner of the room. A single table sat crammed against the far wall, the worst seat in the house, with terrible sightlines. Archer had arranged it entirely on purpose. Donovan didn't move. He stared at me for a long time. So long that the guests at the neighboring tables began to whisper. Finally, he lowered his head, turned around, and walked away. Aubrey scurried after him on her high heels. The train of her mermaid gown dragged awkwardly across the floor. They sat at that table in the corner. Aubrey's face was thunderous, her lips pressed into a thin line. Not a trace of her radiant entrance smile remained. Donovan sat down and never looked at her once. His gaze pierced through the entire ballroom, through the flowers and candles, through the crowd of people, remaining entirely fixed on the head table. On me. Archer handed me a flute of champagne, leaned down slightly, and murmured close to my ear, "Well played." "I wasn't playing," I replied. His hand holding the glass paused for a fraction of a second. I turned my head and looked at him. The crystal chandelier reflected brilliantly in his eyes. "When I called you my husband, I wasn't playing." The gala carried on, and halfway through, Aubrey decided to make a move. The charity auction commenced. The first lot was an antique pearl necklace. The auctioneer grandly recited its history. An artifact once belonging to a Gilded Age socialite, lost overseas for decades, finally brought back to American soil. Starting bid, $15,000. Archer raised his paddle. $20,000. A lady at the next table bumped it up. $25,000. Archer, $30. Suddenly, a sickly sweet voice echoed from the corner table. $45,000. It was Aubrey. She held her paddle up, her chin tilted high with the victorious smile of a conqueror. After placing the bid, she shot a glance in our direction, letting it linger on me. The implication was clear. This necklace was going to be hers. The auctioneer exclaimed enthusiastically, $45,000 to Miss Kensington. Do I hear more? Archer prepared to lift his paddle again, but I stopped him. Don't. He looked at me. That necklace doesn't suit you, I said quietly, but loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. Pearls are valued for their perfect roundness and luster. The pearls on that string are mismatched in size, and the luster is completely dull. Even $15,000 is wildly overpriced. Let her have it. Aubrey's smile fossilized on her face. The auctioneer coughed awkwardly. $45,000 going once. Going twice. Sold. Congratulations to Miss Kensington. Aubrey won the necklace, but she looked as if she had swallowed battery acid. The next lot was a vintage jade bracelet, emerald green, translucent, looking like frozen spring water. Starting bid, $80,000. This time, Aubrey didn't raise her paddle. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't. $80,000 was serious money for her. And Donovan, from the moment he sat down, hadn't looked at anyone. His eyes remained permanently glued to our table. Archer raised his paddle. $150,000. The room went dead silent, jumping straight from $80,000 to $150,000. This wasn't an auction, it was an execution. No one dared to outbid him. The auctioneer's hand shook as he brought the gavel down. The bracelet was delivered to our table. Archer took it, picked up my left hand, and slid it onto my wrist. The vibrant green jade looked breathtaking against pale skin. "Now this suits you," he said. I felt the gaze from the corner of the room grow burning hot. Donovan was staring at me. Not at my face, but at my wrist. At the bracelet. He remembered. He remembered me telling him that my grandmother had owned a jade bracelet, a family heirloom passed down for generations, before my aunt tragically lost it. I told him I would buy myself a similar one someday, not to flaunt wealth, but to honor my grandmother's memory. I had mentioned this to Donovan several times. He always just nodded and said, "Yeah, sure, we'll go look at some eventually." And that was always where it ended. Now, that bracelet sat on my wrist. Bought by Archer. Donovan suddenly stood up. His chair screeched harshly against the floor as it pushed back. Everyone at the adjacent tables turned to look. Aubrey grabbed his sleeve. He ripped his arm away and marched straight to our table. "Cassidy, we need to talk." Archer set down his champagne flute. "Mr. Vance, you are interrupting my wife's dinner. This is between her and me." Donovan stared at me, ignoring Archer completely. 5 minutes. I picked up my napkin, dabbed my lips, and stood. Fine. 5 minutes. Archer looked at me. I gave him a subtle nod, letting him know I had this handled. The hallway outside the ballroom was lined with thick carpeting that absorbed the sound of footsteps. Crystal sconces on the walls emitted a dim yellow glow, casting bizarre, shifting shadows across Donovan's face. "What do you want to talk about?" I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. "Did you really marry him?" "The certificate is in my bag. Do you want me to show you?" Donovan clenched and unclenched his fists. "Why? Give me one good reason." "A reason?" I tilted my head. "Donovan, the night you brought Aubrey home, I was standing right outside your bedroom door. I heard you tell her, 'You don't need to feel marginalized. That reason is good enough.'" His pupils contracted violently. "You were outside the door?" "I heard everything from beginning to end. How you let her live in our bedroom, use my closet, wear your shirt, and the very next morning when I was leaving, you just told me to take care." The hallway fell dead silent. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning. "Donovan, I gave you a chance." My voice was as light as a feather dropping onto the carpet. "I asked if you had anything to say to me. You said no. Now, it's too late." I turned to walk away. He lunged and grabbed my wrist. Hard. His fingernails dug into my skin. "Cassidy, you can't do this to me. We were together for 2 years, and you turned around and married another man in 10 minutes. I looked down at his hand gripping my wrist, then back up at his face. "Donovan, it took you exactly 5 minutes to move Aubrey into our bedroom. Compared to you, I took my time." His fingers slackened. "Cassidy, and one more thing." I pulled my phone out of my clutch, opened an image file, and turned the screen toward him. "That plot of land you bought in the Southport Commercial District. The city's new subway transit map was published last week. Take a look for yourself." Donovan took the phone. On the screen was a highly detailed schematic. A dotted red line completely bisected the property. The legend read, "Proposed Metropolitan Subway Expansion." The exit for the station was positioned exactly where the luxury shopping mall was supposed to be built. His hands began to shake. "Where did you get this blueprint?" "I handled the negotiations," I said. "I received all the documentation, including the city's zoning updates. You signed the final contract without asking me a single question." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the night I got back, I looked you in the eye, I enunciated every word with razor precision, and you had moved another woman into our bedroom." Donovan's face drained entirely. He stumbled back a step, his shoulder hitting the wall. "You did this on purpose." "I didn't do anything on purpose." I snatched my phone back. "I just stopped wiping your ass. Do you have any idea how many times I cleaned up your messes over these 2 years? You got drunk, I picked you up. You botched negotiations, I salvaged them. I picked out the birthday gifts for your parents. I even wrote the damn recommendation letter for your sister's college application. I adjusted my sleeve, fully exposing the jade bracelet. Donovan, I am not your mother, I am not your maid, and I am not a vase meant to sit quietly in your mansion. You never actually wanted me. You wanted an executive assistant who could solve all your problems, and a woman who would act helpless and worship the ground you walked on. Aubrey plays the second role perfectly. I wish you both a lifetime of happiness." I walked down the hallway without breaking my stride. Behind me, a dull thud echoed against the wall. A fist, probably. Aubrey was standing around the corner. She looked horrendous. In her hand, she clutched that $45,000 pearl necklace. "Cassidy Sterling? Did you set this all up on purpose?" "Yes." "You just wanted to make him regret it?" I stopped and looked at her. "Whether he regrets it or not is absolutely none of my business." "Stop acting like a saint." Her voice went shrill. "You married some rich guy, and now you're coming back to humiliate us. Who do you think you are?" "Who do I think I am?" I turned around and walked right up to her. "Aubrey, the slippers you wear are mine. The vanity you sit at is mine. The man you are hugging is the one I threw out." She took a step back. "The house you live in, I picked it out. The bed you sleep in, I chose it. The plates you eat off of, I imported them. Even that citrus detox juice in your fridge, I made the recipe myself." I stopped inches from her face. In my heels, I was half a head taller. "You are covered from head to toe in my leftovers. And you have the audacity to ask who I think I am?" Aubrey's lips trembled. She couldn't force out a single syllable. I smiled, reached out, and plucked the necklace from her hands. She tried to snatch it back, but my glare froze her in place. I held the necklace up to the light. $45,000 for this. Donovan will reimburse you." Her expression cracked. He wouldn't give me the card." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she bit her lip. I laughed, handed the necklace back to her, and patted her on the shoulder. Take good care of it then. After all, you bought it yourself. Walking back into the ballroom, I was still smiling. Archer caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. Handled? Handled. I sat down, picked up my knife and fork, and resumed cutting my steak. It had already gone cold, but I didn't care. Archer. The subway map. Thank you. He didn't say a word. He simply swapped my plate of cold steak with his untouched hot one. 3 days after the charity gala, all hell broke loose at Vance Holdings. First, the city officially published the subway expansion plan for the Southport Commercial District. That morning, Vance Holdings stock plummeted by 12%. Investors screamed at Donovan over conference calls for 40 minutes straight. The consensus was brutal. Do you not check the zoning laws before you drop billions on land? Donovan had no defense, because he genuinely hadn't checked. He had trusted me too much, or rather, he had grown too accustomed to me handling these problems for him. Previously, for every major acquisition, I was the one who pored over the documents and verified every microscopic detail. All he had to do was sign his name and bask in the glory. This time, he signed his name, and he lost me. The second disaster hit later that afternoon. Vance Holdings' largest supplier abruptly announced the termination of their contract. The official reason provided was a shift in corporate strategy. But Donovan's assistant quickly discovered that the day before, a subsidiary of Hawthorne Capital had locked the supplier into an exclusive contract by offering a 15% premium. The third blow followed immediately. Construction on Vance Holdings' massive logistics center in the Midwest was slapped with an injunction due to environmental permit violations. Donovan had personally handled those permits. Then came the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. In 3 days, Vance Holdings' market capitalization evaporated by nearly $400 million. Donovan's father, Peter Vance, flew in from overseas. During an emergency board meeting, without caring that all the top executives were watching, he tore his son to shreds. You put this entire company on the chopping block over some woman? Donovan sat at the far end of the boardroom table and said nothing. Because it really was his fault. When he brought Aubrey home, he hadn't thought about the consequences. When he evicted me from the master bedroom, he hadn't thought about the consequences. When he stood at the window and watched me roll my suitcase down the driveway, he hadn't thought about the consequences. Now, the consequences had arrived. Each blow was surgical and devastating, triggering a perfectly orchestrated chain reaction. Because it was exactly that, a perfectly orchestrated chain reaction. In Archer's executive office, one entire wall was dominated by a massive glass whiteboard. Pinned to it were organizational flowcharts of Vance Holdings, project maps, supplier lists, and partnership networks. Every single vulnerability was mapped out in stark detail, with a corresponding plan of attack. He had been preparing these plans for 3 years. 3 years ago, at the business school alumni mixer, Donovan had tried to get me drunk. I have a high tolerance, but he didn't know that. He kept walking up to me, raising his glass, saying, "Cassidy, you're holding up so well," and pouring me more and more. He wanted to see me make a fool of myself. He wanted to prove to everyone that the woman who always outperformed him academically was actually nothing special. Archer was the one who pulled me away from the table. He guided me to the restroom, handed me a bottle of water, and stood guard at the door, refusing to let anyone in. He didn't say a word that night, but starting from that day, data on Vance Holdings began appearing on his whiteboard. You've been preparing for this since then? I stood in the doorway of his office, staring at the board. Archer sat behind his desk holding a red dry erase marker. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because back then, you still loved him. He set the marker down. I didn't want you to feel like I was forcing you to make a choice. I walked into the office and sat down across from him. The name Donovan Vance was circled in red ink on the board. Dozens of lines branched out from it, and next to almost every single one was a checkmark indicating executed. How much is left? I asked. The final strike. Archer pulled a dossier from his drawer and slid it across the desk toward me. Their Midwest Logistics Center. It's their final source of liquid capital. If we choke out this project, their operating cash will dry up completely within a month. I opened the file. Inside were copies of the land leases and zoning permits. Is there something wrong with this land? No. Archer leaned back in his leather chair. The land is perfect, the location is strategic, and the permits are rock solid. Donovan genuinely didn't make a mistake on this one. Then how are you going to? I'm not going to touch the project. I looked up at him. The light from his desk lamp reflected in his eyes, revealing absolute, chilling confidence. I'm going to take his people. The very next day, the chief engineer of the Midwest project, along with his entire technical team, handed in their resignations to Vance Holdings. Donovan desperately offered to triple their salaries. Not a single person stayed. Because Hawthorne Capital didn't just offer them salaries, they offered them equity stakes in a new subsidiary. On the fifth day, Donovan sat alone in his corner office at the top of the Vance Holdings high-rise. Outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows stretched the most expensive real estate in the city. His father had built this skyscraper 10 years ago. 38 floors. Donovan's office was at the very pinnacle. From here, you could see half the skyline, including the Hawthorne Capital Tower, which loomed even higher. His assistant walked in holding a document. Mr. Vance. We got a response from the banks. Donovan didn't turn around. And? All 3 banks have declined to extend our lines of credit. The assistant's voice grew weaker. The reason cited. The reason cited is severe instability in the financial health of Vance Holdings. Donovan pressed his palm flat against the cold glass. The chill seeped straight into his heart. And one more thing. The assistant placed another document on the desk. A private equity fund managed by Hawthorne Capital just sent over a buyout proposal. Donovan whipped around. A buyout for what? For Vance Holdings' stake in the Southport Commercial District and a 51% controlling share of the Midwest Logistics Center. The offer price is. The assistant swallowed hard. 60% of current market value. 60% isn't an acquisition. It's highway robbery. It's holding a knife to a bleeding man's throat and emptying his pockets. Donovan snatched the proposal and skimmed it. The terms were brutally clinical. Every sentence breathed an air of aristocratic arrogance. No threats, no pressure tactics. Just the cold statement of an undeniable fact. Your company is moments away from complete collapse, and I am the only man in this city who can afford to buy the wreckage. On the final page, the signature was already penned. Archer Hawthorne. The handwriting was aggressive, sharp as a blade. Donovan slammed the document onto the desk. Tell him to go to hell. The assistant didn't move. Mr. Vance. Earlier this afternoon, several board members convened an emergency session. They voted to accept the buyout proposal. Donovan froze. What? 7 votes in favor, 2 opposed. Your father, Peter Vance, voted in favor. His own father. On the board of directors, his own father voted to sell the family's legacy to a stranger. Donovan collapsed into his executive chair. The expensive leather, broken in over years of use, molded perfectly to his body. Sitting in this chair, he had signed countless documents and made countless executive decisions. Things had always gone his way. Now, even this chair might no longer belong to him. His phone vibrated on the desk. A text from Aubrey. Donovan, I just saw the most amazing limited edition Hermes bag. Can you buy it for me? It's only $85,000. Donovan stared at the message for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and dialed a number. Not Aubrey's. Mine. The phone rang while I was watering the plants on the balcony of Archer's apartment. An unknown number flashed on the screen, but I knew it by heart. I answered. Cassidy. Donovan's voice was completely shot, gravelly and hollow. He orchestrated all of this, didn't he? What are you talking about? Archer. He's buying out Vance Holdings. Every single piece was calculated. The Southport land, the engineering team in the Midwest, the banks, everything. I set the watering can down and leaned against the railing. Donovan, you signed the Southport contract yourself. You failed to retain the Midwest team yourself. The banks cut off your credit because your company is bleeding cash. Every single one of those decisions was made by you. Dead silence hung on the other end. My biggest mistake wasn't any of that. His voice dropped to a shattered whisper. My biggest mistake was that night, when I let you walk out of our bedroom. The evening breeze swept over the balcony, carrying the scent of the city below. Donovan, I said. Your biggest mistake wasn't letting me walk out of the bedroom. Then what was it? It was that you never believed I was actually important. I hung up, and I permanently blocked the number. Archer. I hadn't noticed when he walked out, but he was standing in the balcony doorway holding 2 mugs of tea. He called? Yes. I took a mug. The tea was a pale amber. He said you calculated every single move. Archer leaned against the doorframe and took a sip. He's right. And exactly what were you calculating? He looked at me. The fading evening light reflected in his eyes, softening their usual intensity. I was calculating you. Donovan learned the full truth on the day the Vance Holdings acquisition was finalized. The signing ceremony was scheduled in the exact same grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton where the charity gala had been held, where he had seen me wearing that sapphire necklace, standing next to Archer. Archer had done it entirely on purpose. He rented out the whole room, arranged the tables and chairs exactly the same way. Even the floral centerpieces were identical. When Donovan walked in, he froze. He recognized the layout immediately. He saw the place card on the head table that read Archer Hawthorne, and right next to it, Mrs. Hawthorne, just like that night. Only this time, he wasn't the unwanted guest banished to the corner. He was the man walking to the slaughter to sign away his company. The executive board of Vance Holdings sat on one side of a long mahogany table, Hawthorne Capital's legal team on the other. When Donovan walked in, everyone looked up. No one stood. Even his father, Peter Vance, sat at the far end of the table, both hands resting heavily on his cane, staring intensely at the polished wood. He did not look at his son once. Donovan signed the transfer documents. The sound of his expensive fountain pen scratching across the thick paper was quiet, yet it sounded like something tearing apart. Once signed, he set the pen down. "Where is Archer?" The lead attorney for Hawthorne Capital looked up. "Mr. Hawthorne will not be attending the ceremony. He asked me to pass along a message." "What message?" He said, "Thank you for the Southport Commercial District. You saved me a considerable amount of time in negotiations." Donovan's fists clenched. Just then, the heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open. I walked in. Not as Mrs. Hawthorne, but as Cassidy Sterling. Cassidy. Seeing me, Donovan jolted upright as if struck by a live wire. I didn't even look at him. I walked straight up to the table and placed a thick manila folder in front of his father. "Mr. Vance, this is the preliminary geological survey report for the Southport property. This exact report was filed in the Vance Holdings archives long before your son ever signed that contract." Peter Vance took the folder and flipped through a few pages. The color drained from his face. "Donovan." The old man's voice wasn't loud, but it echoed through the silent ballroom. "Did you see this report?" Donovan froze. "What report?" "The geological survey. It says right here in black and white that a metropolitan subway line runs directly beneath the property, rendering it entirely unsuitable for commercial high-rise development. This report was delivered to your executive office 3 months ago." Donovan went deathly pale. "Impossible. I never received that report." "You did receive it," I said. Every eye in the room snapped to me. "I personally placed it into the inbox on your desk." The date was March 12th. It was a Monday. You came back from your morning executive meeting. There were 7 high-priority folders in your inbox requiring your signature. This report was the 3rd one down. Donovan's eyes darted frantically as he tried to pull the memory from his mind. "March 12th, he muttered. "You left work early that day," I said smoothly. "Because Aubrey called and said she wasn't feeling well. You went to pick her up. You took her shopping. That night, you posted a carousel of 9 photos on Instagram. The center photo was of her tossing a coin into a fountain." Donovan's hands began to shake violently. "You never came back to the office. Out of the 7 files, you only signed the top 2. The remaining 5, including this survey report, you never even glanced at." The ballroom was dead silent. Crack. Peter Vance slammed his heavy wooden cane onto the floor. "Donovan!" The old man's shoulders heaved. "You stopped doing your goddamn job because of a girl?" Donovan said nothing. He stared at me. A chaotic, agonizing mix of emotions warred in his eyes. "You knew the report was in that pile?" he choked out. "You intentionally placed it 3rd. You calculated all of this. You knew I wouldn't see it. Why didn't you warn me?" I smiled. "Donovan, I was your fiancé, not your executive assistant. Reviewing your paperwork was something I did out of goodwill, not obligation. Once you started taking my goodwill for granted, you shouldn't act so surprised when one day I decided to only perform my actual obligations." Peter Vance stood up. His fingers, pointing at Donovan, were white from strain. "Do you hear yourself? This is your own doing. You have no one to blame but yourself. This company was in your hands for 5 years. What did you actually accomplish? Every single milestone you claimed was achieved because Cassidy was standing behind you. Did you really think you were a goddamn genius?" Donovan couldn't force a single word past his lips. Peter Vance leaned heavily on his cane and began walking toward the exit. As he passed me, he stopped. Cassidy. The old man's voice softened drastically. The Vance family wronged you. It's not necessary, Mr. Vance, I said evenly. It's all in the past. He nodded and continued walking. At the massive double doors, he turned and looked back at his son. Donovan, when your grandfather founded Vance Holdings, he had $20 in his pocket. It took you 5 years to hand 3 generations of blood and sweat over to a stranger. The doors clicked shut. Only Donovan, myself, and a few corporate lawyers packing up briefcases remained in the massive room. Donovan leaned heavily against the mahogany table, as if someone had removed all the bones from his body. Cassidy. When did you start planning all of this? From the very first day you let Aubrey sit in the passenger seat of your car. His pupils contracted. He had probably forgotten that day entirely. But I hadn't. It was the first anniversary of our relationship. I had booked a reservation at an exclusive restaurant, put on a brand new dress, and waited for him downstairs. He pulled up. The passenger door opened, and Aubrey climbed out. She had twisted her ankle, and he was holding her by the waist to steady her. Aubrey was on my route, so I gave her a lift, he had said, as casually as commenting on the weather. I ate almost nothing that night. Aubrey sat across the table, flashing an innocent smile. Miss Sterling, please don't get the wrong idea. Donovan and I are just friends. And Donovan had nodded in agreement. That was the first time I saw Aubrey in his passenger seat, but not the last. Donovan, I said, do you know that women never leave suddenly? Every departure is the culmination of accumulated disappointment. Why didn't you tell me? I did tell you. I looked straight into his eyes. I told you many times. I texted you asking you to come home early. You replied that you were busy. I asked you not to let other women ride in your passenger seat. You said I was being petty. I told you the way Aubrey looked at you wasn't right. You said I was hallucinating. I pulled out my phone, pulled up a text thread from over a year ago, and turned the screen toward him. I saved every single word. Donovan stared at the screen, his eyes slowly turning bloodshot. Did you really think I didn't know your phone passcode was her birthday? Did you think I didn't know that when you went on business trips, you bought souvenirs in sets of 2? Did you think I didn't know that Aubrey helped you pick out my engagement ring? Donovan's head snapped up. How? How could you know that? I know because the regional manager at the jeweler is my friend. The purchase invoice had both of your names on it. Donovan staggered on his feet. Cassidy. The fireworks on the night you proposed were beautiful, I said, my voice as calm as if I were narrating a movie I had watched years ago. But the man standing under those fireworks, from that moment on, was already a stranger to me. I turned and walked out of the ballroom. Behind me, a heavy thud echoed. Donovan had fallen to his knees. The sound of his kneecaps hitting the solid marble floor was violent, like a sack of cement dropped from a high scaffolding. I didn't look back. Archer was waiting for me in the hallway. He wore a sharp navy suit, no tie. He was holding a paper cup of hot tea. Told him? Told him. He handed me the tea. The warmth seeped nicely through the cardboard sleeve. He's on his knees. I know. Archer looked at me. Feel bad for him? I took a sip of the tea. Is this caramel? No. I looked up at him. The ambient lighting in the hallway softened the sharp angles of his face. Archer, I said. Donovan Vance is on his knees in there, and you are standing right here next to me. He froze for a second, then a slow smile spread across his face. Let's go. He held out his hand. I placed mine into his. Our fingers intertwined. The doors to the ballroom remained wide open. The shadow of Donovan Vance, kneeling alone on the floor, stretched out long and distorted, looking like a crack in the marble that would never heal. After I left, Donovan remained kneeling for a long time. Eventually, hotel security had to come and help him up. The head of hotel security, reporting to Archer over the phone, could barely mask his shock. He said Donovan had been on his knees for almost 40 minutes, bleeding onto the marble. Archer hung up the phone and looked at me. He wants to see you. I casually flipped a page of my Vogue magazine without lifting my head. I don't want to see him. 3 days later, Donovan's mother, Eleanor Vance, arrived at Archer's corporate office. This woman rarely made public appearances, not even at shareholder meetings. She wore a simple but staggeringly expensive tailored dress, gripping a Hermes Kelly bag in her hands. Her makeup was flawless, but the fine lines around her eyes betrayed her age. When the receptionist called up, Archer and I were playing chess. Let her come up, I said. Archer looked at me. Are you sure? I'm sure. Walking into the executive office, the first thing Eleanor Vance saw was me. She stopped in the doorway, clearly struggling with how to address me. Cassidy? Mrs. Hawthorne? Finally, she settled on, Cassidy. I stood up. Mrs. Vance. Please. Have a seat. She sat down, placing her handbag on her lap. Cassidy, I didn't come here about the company buyout, she began. I came because of Donovan. I remained silent. Donovan hasn't left his room in 3 days. He's not eating, he's not drinking, he won't speak. I went in to check on him. He was sitting on the floor, holding a photograph. Eleanor Vance pulled a glossy photo from her bag and laid it on the desk. It was a picture of Donovan and me, taken 2 years ago at a beach resort. He had hoisted me onto his shoulders. I was screaming in mock terror, and he was laughing like an absolute idiot. He found this photo buried among the things you left behind, she said, her voice cracking. You didn't take it. I had no need to take it. Eleanor Vance's eyes went red. Cassidy, I know Donovan wronged you. He was blind, completely intoxicated by that Aubrey girl. But he understands now. He realizes his mistake. Mrs. Vance, I cut her off. What exactly does he realize? She froze. He realizes he was wrong. Wrong about what? I stared directly into her eyes. Wrong to bring Aubrey into our home? Or wrong because he didn't catch that geological survey in time? Is he sorry because he kicked me out of my own bedroom? Or is he sorry because he never actually believed I would leave? Eleanor Vance didn't know how to answer. He hasn't realized his mistake, I said quietly. He simply cannot accept the price he had to pay. If Archer hadn't bought out Vance Holdings, if the zoning on that land had been fine, if he was still the untouchable CEO Donovan Vance, do you really think he would have dropped to his knees in that ballroom? Eleanor Vance's lips trembled, and tears finally spilled over her perfectly powdered cheeks. But he is in so much pain right now. He earned it. When she left, Eleanor Vance stood in the doorway for a long time. She didn't beg anymore. She just looked at me with a gaze that was a messy cocktail of regret, pity, and ultimate resignation. When the door clicked shut, Archer picked up a black knight and placed it decisively on the board. Checkmate. I looked down at the board. My white king was trapped in the corner. You won. You let me win. He began collecting the pieces. You started throwing the game on the 37th move. I didn't deny it. A week later, Donovan was discharged from the hospital. He had been admitted for 5 days with severe dehydration and a bleeding stomach ulcer. On the day of his discharge, paparazzi snapped a photo of him outside the Greenwich estate gates. In the picture, Donovan was wearing a gray hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face. He had lost a shocking amount of weight. Looming behind him was the mansion where I had lived for 2 years. The Dutch tulips in the garden had all withered. The photo hit the tabloids with the headline, "The Vance heir, broken and defeated." Aubrey left a comment under the article, "Donovan, I will always stand by you." 3 hours later, Donovan deleted her comment. 2 hours after that, Aubrey posted on her own feed, "Some people don't appreciate what they have and only regret it once it's gone. But there is no medicine in this world that cures regret." She probably thought Donovan would see it. But his account had already been deactivated. Half a month later, Archer and I held our wedding ceremony at the historic Hawthorne family estate in upstate New York. No press, no extravagant spectacles, just our closest inner circle. Archer's grandmother, sitting in her wheelchair, smiled the entire evening. After we exchanged rings, she reached out and took my hand. Beautiful. Even better than the photograph. What photograph? I asked. The elderly woman pulled something from the side pocket of her wheelchair. It was that exact photo from the business school alumni mixer. This boy kept this picture on his desk for 3 years, she laughed, her eyes crinkling. I kept telling him, if you like the girl, go after her. But he always refused, said, I can't, she's with someone else. I looked over at Archer. He was talking to a groomsman, and the tips of his ears were unmistakably red. At the end of the night, the estate manager brought over a thick envelope. Mr. Hawthorne, this was left at the front gates. Archer opened it. Inside was a cashier's check and a handwritten note. The amount on the check was exactly 3 times the price Vance Holdings had originally paid for the Southport land. The memo line read, "Offer to repurchase the Southport Commercial District plot at original valuation." The note contained a single line, written in Donovan's messy handwriting. "Cassidy, I bought the company back. Will you come back?" Archer handed the note to me. I glanced at it, then folded it neatly into quarters. How do you want to reply? Archer asked. I held the folded note over a silver candelabra on our table. The flame licked the paper. It curled, blackened, and disintegrated into ash. I don't. Archer watched me for 3 seconds, then held out his hand. Let's go home. I placed my hand in his. His grip was warm. When we walked out of the estate gates, night had fully fallen. Standing beneath a massive oak tree by the entrance was a man. Gray hoodie, hood pulled low. Donovan. He looked even gaunter than in the tabloid photos. Seeing me, he took a desperate step forward. Archer's grip on my hand tightened slightly. Don't. I let go of Archer's hand and walked toward the tree. Donovan's eyes flared with desperate hope. Cassidy. I stopped 3 paces away from him. I received the check. The land is not for sale. He froze. I'll pay any price. It's not about the money. I pulled a crimson envelope from my clutch and held it out to him. Donovan took it with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were Archer's and my names, embossed in gold. He stared at the invitation, his hands shaking so violently the cardstock rattled. You came out here just to hand me an invitation? Yes. The wedding was today. This is for you. My voice was perfectly calm. Donovan, you always complained that I never left you any way out. Today, I'm giving you one. This invitation is your way out. What way? The path to regret. He looked up at me. His eyes were entirely bloodshot. Cassidy, I truly understand now. Give me one more chance. Just one. Donovan, I interrupted him. Do you know what the biggest difference is between you and Archer? He stood paralyzed. When you kicked me out of our bedroom, you told me to take care on the road. When he handed me the keys to his apartment, he said, "The keys are already yours." The night breeze swept past us, rustling the oak leaves. One pushed me out, the other let me in. Who do you think I would choose? Tears finally spilled over Donovan's lashes, tracing down his hollow cheeks. He collapsed to his knees in the dirt beneath the tree, clutching the crimson invitation to his chest. Cassidy. Donovan. Out of this entire ordeal, I hope you've learned one lesson. I looked down at him. Not everyone who walks away comes back. I turned around and walked back to Archer. He held his hand out, and I took it. In the exact moment the door of the Rolls-Royce closed, I heard a hoarse, agonizing scream from behind me. Cassidy! The sound dissolved into the night wind, like a wound that would never, ever heal. I did not look back. The car glided onto the highway. The city lights began to blur past the window. Archer, steering with one hand, turned toward me and gently took my hand with the other. Are you crying? No. And you never will again. I leaned my head against the leather headrest, watching the skyline roll by. No, I never will again.